are very delighted to welcome Amy Kobeta.
Thank you.
I'm all set. Good morning, everyone. Never quite handled the whole mic thing in my face, and so if I step away and you can't hear me anymore, like just nudge and I'll come back to the microphone. Sometimes I just forget.
It's a handheld if you want.
Yeah, and then it goes like this. So I really, all the training that I've done in my life, speaking into a microphone, unfortunately there's no program for that, so it's all trial and error. Good morning. Thank you very much for all of you being here. This is particularly early for me. It is one of the benefits of not being a churchgoer is that I get to sleep late on Sundays. So this is, my church, I guess, this Sunday morning. I'm just thrilled at how many folks are here. Wow. Did everybody get enough materials? Let me just start off with that. So there were some folks who came in late. I'm not necessarily going to reference these materials. I hate it when a speaker gives stuff out and then reads it. So we're going to talk about other stuff, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody had a copy of these materials. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I grew up outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the second of 4 daughters to Republican Catholics. As time has gone by, the 4 daughters have grown in very different ways. My older sister is a Christian, but not necessarily religious, apolitical, married, heterosexual mother of 1. I am a lesbian, Democrat, pro-choice activist. My younger sister is a devout Catholic, married in a formal Catholic wedding. She and her husband do not practice any type of birth control. They follow the teachings of the Catholic Church verbatim. They're not what some people consider the cafeteria Catholics. They pick a little bit of this and a little bit of this. They're like, whoop, right on. And then my youngest sister just converted to Orthodox Judaism and is getting married in July. And so my dad says, he jokes all the time that when he would tell people that he has 4 daughters, and they would say, oh, 4 weddings. And my dad says, yeah, who knew by the end of it, I'd end up having the Justice of the Peace, the gay wedding, the Catholic wedding, and the Jewish wedding. Like, I just wasn't prepared for this. So I come from a very diverse background. And you can imagine what our Thanksgivings are like. So we talk a lot about the weather and home decorating, and we all get along beautifully. I'm convinced that a lot of my older, it's actually kind of funny. My older relatives, I'm out as a lesbian, but I'm not out as a Planned Parenthood employee. My mother's like, oh God, don't tell them that. That'll break their hearts. So it's just, it's kind of amazing how people perceive, differences among family members. So coming from a family that is Republican Catholic and having discourse with not only the people who present themselves as Planned Parenthood opposition here in Arizona, but also having done conversations like this throughout our territory, which is central and northern Arizona. It's really fascinating to me how much religion has started to influence the choice dialogue. Back in '91, when I first started volunteering for Planned Parenthood, you heard various criticisms of Planned Parenthood, but they were traditional. You are a baby killer. You kill babies, you manipulate women, you kill babies, yada, yada, yada. And so we heard that all the time. And so after a while, you learned how to respond to you're a baby killer. And then I think their tactics became a little more subtle. Took a little longer for it to gain some ground. But now we're getting the response of, if you don't agree with my religious beliefs, you're persecuting me as a person of faith. And that is a much more difficult tactic to challenge. As you well know, an overwhelming majority of this country, while they are pro-choice, also consider themselves people of faith. And so how do you take that same 70% that says, yes, I believe in abortion, and then, yes, I also believe in God, and I believe in spirituality, and so it becomes a little more difficult to have a conversation. Very good example of this is what they're referring to now is embryo adoption. And embryo adoption is a program that would adopt out abandoned embryos in fertility clinics. As you know now, as you may not know rather, in a fertility clinic, you have a number of fertilized eggs, and sometimes they implant and sometimes they don't, and so you've got a little stash of them. So the donors of the egg and sperm can then say, oh, well, I will donate this to science, I'll have it destroyed, or somebody else can use it. And so the somebody else can use it is now what they're referring to as embryo adoption. And there's almost $1 million that was that is being considered right now in the U.S. Senate, $975,000 to go toward educating people about embryo adoption. Because, oh, you can't discard this, this is life. This is a fertilized egg, this is life. We run into the same challenge then with emergency contraception, which you guys have probably known for years as the morning after pill. And emergency contraception prevents pregnancy by either stopping ovulation, stopping fertilization, or stopping a fertilized egg from implanting in the uterus. Pretty basic. It's not a baby. It's not, implanted anywhere. It's a fertilized egg. And they say, no, our religious belief dictates that a fertilized egg is life. That life begins at fertilization, not at implantation. And we say, science tells us that life begins at implantation. And they say, well, you're persecuting me for my religious beliefs. And it gets very difficult then to be able to have any type of dialogue about common ground. At Planned Parenthood, we like to say it takes 3 things actually to make a baby. It's the sperm, it's the egg, and the uterus. And they say, no, you just need the first 2. And so we have a real challenge when we're down at the legislature trying to talk to socially conservative legislators about this. And they say, you know what, I can't even have a dialogue with you on this because I firmly believe that a fertilized egg is life. And anything that you do to interfere with that is destroying life. So now they've even expanded it to include really common forms of birth control, the pill, the patch, and things that liberated women, quite frankly, back in the 60s, are now being construed as abortifacients, as causing abortions. The pill does, in about 10% of circumstances, actually prohibit a fertilized egg from implanting into a uterus. And they say, oh, look, then that has a possibility of taking life, of ending life, and so therefore, we should have exceptions to being able to provide birth control. There shouldn't be government funding for birth control. The best thing to do is abstinence. If you don't want to get pregnant, you're just abstinent, which is a whole other conversation. I'll get to it a little bit. If I get too angry all at once, I stop making sense by the end. And so there's been a few bills that have come up. One was really a high-profile bill, which was referred to as the Pharmacist Conscience Clause, which we actually refer to as the Family Planning Refusal Clause, because they're, quite frankly, refusing to provide the services, so therefore it's a refusal clause. And when the bill was initially introduced, what it said was that pharmacists, medical doctors, any of their staff, medical institutions, and entire pharmacies could deny women any type of birth control, any type of emergency contraception, abortion, and sterilization. That if any staff or any institution objected on the basis of their moral and religious beliefs, they could not provide those 4 categories. Sterilization? I mean, this is insane. Birth control? I mean, it's just unheard of. And they seem to think it's the most natural thing in the world because, you wouldn't want to violate somebody's personal beliefs. And our response is, but you're medical professionals. You entered into this profession knowing that you are going to have to provide some very common and fundamental health care. You know, birth control is not a plus, it's fundamental health care. Planning your family is fundamental health care. And so we had quite the challenge with that particular bill. It was then pared down so it would not include sterilization and regular birth control, only emergency contraception and abortion. And we're like, well, look, the statute already exists that you don't have to participate in abortion. We've had this on the books for something like 15 years. So this is really your way of stopping women from having access to emergency contraception. And I don't know if you're familiar with the stories that are coming in from all around the country where women are going into pharmacists and saying, oh, here, I have a prescription from my doctor for emergency contraception. And some women are asked their marital status. Some women are asked if they used any kind of protection. Some women are lectured about having sex before marriage. Some women are just denied the access. No, I don't provide that. I don't agree with that. Some pharmacists have taken away the prescription and said, no, this is murder, and then throw it away. You can't get it from me, and I'm not giving you your prescription back, so nah. And it's like this is the level of discourse that they're having with women across this country. So it's very disappointing to see that they're starting with this legislation now in Arizona, and I'm certain that they will bring it up again to give pharmacists, medical doctors, and their staff, medical institutions and pharmacies an opportunity to deny women access to emergency contraceptive based solely on their religious or personal beliefs. Another issue that's come up is stem cell research. And I won't go into that in a lot of detail, but you know that is a constant conversation that's happening nationally as well as locally with, again, the religious interpretation of a fertilized egg being life. And so it is this very narrow belief of what life is, which, again, contradicts the science that is really creating the foundation of the anti-choice movement right now. They're not just talking about abortion. Now they're talking about, again, embryo adoption, birth control, stem cell research, emergency contraceptives. So it's really starting to fan out. So now we're having a more difficult time fighting against this broader attack. And, you know, like even George Will had mentioned in that article, the editorial when it came out, is, you know, it's hard to be able to debate people on that religious basis. Their response, as I mentioned earlier, to people needing birth control and people, people birth control, IUDs, emergency contraception is just be abstinent. Just don't have any sex at all. And if you're married, then you can follow the rhythm method. So just make sure you know what days you can't get pregnant, even though it only has a 64% chance of actually being successful. But you can't use anything else. To use anything else is to interfere with life. So just be abstinent until you're married. And, you know, I don't necessarily want to see 14-year-olds and 12-year-olds having sex. Still a little comfortable with 15-year-olds, 16, 17, you know, really wish that they would kind of wait a little longer, but come on, they're teenagers. But I do not know any 27-year-old virgins. I don't know any 30-year-old virgins. And I'm sure that they're out there, and good for them if they're making this choice. But it's an unrealistic way of looking at the world that we live in. They keep citing statistics that the rate of sex between unmarried partners has just grown dramatically over the past, well, since 1954. So what is that, 60 years, 50 years? And so that's kind of shocking if you think about it. Oh, wow, okay, well, our social norms have really changed then if, you know, if the percentages that they're talking about are true. Wow, this is a little shocking. Maybe we need to evaluate the way that our society is now talking about sex, the way that we have sex in all of our ads, TV, radio, magazines, the way sex is portrayed on MTV. A lot of the pop culture icons now are very, very sexual. So we were thinking, wow, maybe there really is kind of this phenomenon where people are now, viewing sex in a very different way. But the statistics that they're citing are when women got married at 19 and men got married at 21. Women now tend to get married at 24 and men get married at 27. So, of course, if you're going to take out those years, those unmarried years, yeah, people are having more unmarried sex. I'm not sure that just say no is the type of response that our government needs to be engaging in order to prevent unintended pregnancies and to prevent STDs. Just say no didn't work for Nancy Reagan, and it apparently is not working now. There's a question back here.
How do these statistics compare with statistics in Europe?
Well, that's an excellent question. I wish that we had, let me back up. It gets into the American concept about sex, sexual attitudes and sexual behaviors. We are a very Puritan and promiscuous society all at the same time. And in Europe, they don't have the same shame about talking about sex. There is this excellent video, it's about 20 minutes long, and a filmmaker interviewed American teenagers, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, and then went over to Europe, a few countries in Europe, and also interviewed folks, youth there, young adults there. And they kept saying, what about sex? And all of the European youth would say, oh, I learned about sex from when I was little. I learned how to be healthy about sex. I know where to go. My doctor and I have talked about it. My teachers and I have talked about it. We talk about it all the time. My parents know, my girlfriend, they know that we're having sex. And then the filmmaker said, well, do you carry condoms? Oh yeah, absolutely. And everybody had condoms with them. Everybody. Girls, boys, didn't matter. It was perfectly natural. And so then they came over to the States and they interviewed people from the States and they said, oh no, I never learned anything about sex. No, we don't talk about it in my household. Sex is only right between married people and where you have to really be in love with them. I mean, they kind of added all of these caveats. Well, you really shouldn't have sex until you're married. But unless, of course, you've been with them for a while, or unless, of course, and it's almost like they would play the little game of, okay, when is it okay that I have sex? And so they never talked about it with their parents. They don't talk about it with their doctor. They never learned anything in school. They don't talk about it among their friends unless it's the bravado. And then the filmmaker said, well, do you have any condoms? And they said, oh my gosh, why would you carry condoms? That would be assuming that you're going to have sex. So if you're walking around with a condom, it must mean that you're looking for it, that you're asking for it, that you're going to be demanding it, that you have your high expectations up. So of course you wouldn't carry a condom because you're not supposed to be having sex.
Don't use seatbelts.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and so it's these divergent attitudes that we have this very sexual culture. I mean, I personally don't watch Desperate Housewives because there's another show on at the same time that I like, but everybody tells me about Desperate Housewives. And there's like women running around having sex, bras, underwear, and it's all perfectly natural. MTV music videos, it's very, very sexual, very graphic. And I don't consider myself a prude, but I consider myself a feminist. And to watch the way that women are being consistently sexualized in our popular culture is not only offensive and infuriating, I think it's a step back in our feminist movement, and I think that it's giving young girls these really skewed attitudes and the way that they're looking at themselves. And so you're seeing girls now who are still giving into the, if I just have sex with my boyfriend, he'll be okay that I'm not that pretty. If I just have sex with my boyfriend, then he'll be okay that, I'm not that skinny, or I'm not that tall, or that my boobs aren't so big. And it's so sad when you're talking with young girls and they really have this attitude of, sex is still my way of getting in. And I think it's kind of a mixture of our Puritan and our promiscuous. I think that it's, women are no longer talking about feminism and the rights of women. And I'm not meaning that as a criticism of women, but as you know, most women now, although they hold feminist beliefs, don't identify themselves as a feminist. Yes?
We should get into a greater definition of what you mean by the word sex, because I know a lot of the kids today have redefined it so that intercourse is now, right, we don't do that, but
Right.
there's everything else.
They consider themselves a virgin if they don't have vaginal intercourse. But if you have anal intercourse, or if you have any type of oral sex, then you're still a virgin. And so you can put that off. It's almost, just as long as you preserve that one spot, you're still a virgin. And we say that sex is sex. You can still get STDs from oral sex. You can still get STDs from anal sex. Yes, you might be preserving the hymen, honey, but there's really not much else. It's still sex. And they really don't get that. So when we're in schools, because Planned Parenthood does have a program where we go out to schools and talk about sex, if they've had an abstinence-only program, which George W. Bush was the one that promoted, even more so than Bill Clinton, but quite frankly, Bill Clinton back in '96 started this whole abstinence-only. So I wish that I could just blame the Republicans, but I can't.
My friend Bill Clinton was into abstinence too in '96.
Yeah. Again, with if it's not vaginal, it's not sex. And so, but yeah, just a little bit of background. When Bill Clinton promised to end welfare as we know it, he started with he agreed to the marriage education classes for welfare recipients, and he also put millions of dollars in for abstinence-only education. So that started it. Now, George W. came along and it strengthened the guidelines, but the guidelines are pretty much no sex until you're married. Sex is only healthy within a heterosexual married relationship. Any type of sex besides heterosexual sex will have significant psychological impacts on you. Having sex before you're married will also have significant lasting psychological effects. And so, being a lesbian, I guess I'm crazy, after years of being out. But they really do, kind of firmly hold this view, but they can't agree on what abstinence is. What they say is abstinence is just, you can kiss and you can hug, but you really shouldn't do anything else than that. Okay, because really, because that 15-year-old out there with hormones raging is going to be like, oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, it just doesn't happen. It's just not a realistic way of looking at the world. And then they're finding that there are higher rates of oral sex. And higher rates of anal sex, things that they have never heard of before, where they're now 3rd and 4th graders are very well versed in what a blowjob is. And I use that word specifically because that's the language that they're using. So they're 10 years old and they're already talking about oral sex, and they're already getting influence and peer pressure to engage in this because there's so much talk about sex being bad. But yet at the same time, they go home, they turn on their TV, and then here are all these women. Oh my God, they're in a bikini top, and they're going down on somebody. This is what I have to do in order to be popular, in order to be pretty. So it's a number of, I think, changes that are happening in our society now that are really leading to this. Now, you may know that the ACLU, the National ACLU, is now filing a lawsuit against one of the states over religion in their abstinence-only programs. The program is called the Silver Ring Thing, which means that on your ring finger, men or boys and girls would wear a silver ring that says they are pledged to Jesus Christ, and so that way they will not have sex until another man or another woman replaces Jesus's silver ring with their silver ring. And then I guess you can have sex with that person because you've divorced God. I don't really know what the alimony is in that. Like if there's a settlement, if there's you have to go to the Supreme Court or there's a higher body, I'm not really sure. So they're suing. They're saying, this is a complete conflict of church and state. In Arizona now, one of the most popular abstinence-only programs is called the WAIT training, and WAIT stands for Why Am I Tempted? Yeah, no religious overtones whatsoever there. And why am I tempted, while is not necessarily religious. We've reviewed the curriculum, and there isn't any blatant religion in there, like Jesus says and God says, but there are some very traditional stereotypes of men and women. Men heat up like a microwave, whereas girls need more time to cook. And they actually have in there what you need, the characteristics that boys and girls need to look for in their heterosexual partners in order to find a fulfilling and happy life. And women need men who are educated, hard workers, dedicated, that are honest and caring. And men need women who are good caretakers, are submissive, are patient, who don't speak out. There is actually a text in there where the teacher is reading and describes a woman that nags her husband all the time. And if you were that husband, don't you think that after a while you would just tune out? So girls, remember, don't nag. This is funded by my tax dollars, and I can't stop it, and that's very frustrating. So this is what we're seeing when you're talking an abstinence-only curriculum. They're not just saying don't have sex. They're saying don't have sex, and girls be good little wives, and husbands be good little husbands, and make sure you take care. And I see both of you. Hold on just a second. And I think that it puts the onus not only on women of, okay, so my focus is going to be my family and my home, not necessarily my career. But then it also puts the onus on men to, resume that title and that, quite frankly, that social burden of always having to be the breadwinner and always having to make more. And haven't we evolved out of this by now? Didn't we start to share responsibilities and make everybody's lives more fulfilling? Anyway, so that's my soapbox. But there's a question over there, and then I see you back there.
What is this program through?
This program is funded. It gets federal funding. What had happened back in 2003, our wonderful governor, Janet Napolitano, vetoed $800,000 state money for abstinence only. And so what that $800,000 would have done is then pulled down $1.2 million federal dollars. And then that would have been distributed through the Department of Health, and various schools would apply and programs would apply. So the WAIT people, I think it's actually Catholic Social Services, one of the biggest grant recipients from the Arizona Department of Health Services for abstinence-only training. And then they go around to schools and say, I'll do an abstinence-only program in your school, and you don't have to pay for it because I've gotten funding through DHS. And schools, that are really facing some tough times. That's a whole other conversation about, how Republicans don't necessarily fund education. But so schools are really strapped and are willing to take any sex ed because parents really want their kids to have sex ed. So there you go. The grant recipients will shop it around. So anyway, so the governor vetoes this $800,000 abstinence only money, and which we were so pleased that she did. And so what those Catholic Social Services and some other organizations was actually tried to raise the $800,000 on their own, so that way then they could match that federal funds and still be able to continue the program. So, but then they couldn't necessarily match the funds, and so they appealed to the federal government and said, we can't raise $800,000. And they said, okay, why don't you raise 10% of that, and then the other 90% we'll take in kind. So all the teaching that you'll do will actually count toward that $800,000. And we'll just really let you off the hook for it. So here's the $1.2 million. Now, what our governor did this legislative session was that she did not veto the $1 million for abstinence-only funding in the budget. which of course had me outraged, which of course had me calling the governor's office. And I wish I could have spoken with the governor myself, but she doesn't take my calls. So I talked with one of her advisors, Lisa Glow. And I said, Lisa, very upset, abstinence-only monies, what are you thinking? Even more studies now show how harmful abstinence-only is. And Lisa said, Amy, it's $1 million, but we never promised to do the federal match. So we told the Republicans, oh, sure, $1 million for abstinence-only programs, not a problem. She said, we have absolutely no intention of appealing to the federal government for their money. She said, we can use this money for, I don't know, what do you want to use it for? And I was like, well, we have this program, and 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 we can do this, and da-da-da-da-da. And she was like, okay. And I was like, I feel so much better now about that $1 million in abstinence only. Damn, she's smart. I don't know that the other side is aware of this yet, so don't call any local reporters until Planned Parenthood gets approved for all of our programs. But that's where the money comes from, and that's who delivers it. And since we hopefully will not be pulling down any federal funds, then a Planned Parenthood curriculum, which is abstinence based, should be able to qualify for state monies. I see you, but there were 2 hands back there. Yes.
With the divorce rate now, at least a couple days ago, saying in Arizona it's over 61% or around 61%. How does this whole abstinence and all that, after the first divorce, is it all hell breaks loose? Do what you want?
You're only supposed to have sex within the confines of a heterosexual married relationship. So once you're divorced, which, shame on you for being divorced, quite frankly. If you follow their teachings, it's marriages for life. And so, I guess you've committed a sin for divorcing. But then again, I guess if you were wearing the silver ring earlier and already divorced Jesus once, like what's it married if you divorce somebody else? So then you are supposed to adopt a, what do they call it? They call it a secondary virginity. And then you're abstinent again until you're married. And then you can have raucous, unprotected sex once you're married. I assume only in the missionary position, but there's no guidelines on that. And so then you're free to have as many babies as God gives you.
Are you suggesting we all become more like Ms. Gingrich and go for 3 or 4 marriages or keep going? Anyone want to have sex?
I don't know, did he keep divorcing them like she didn't give him a son or something? I mean, isn't it, like just woman after woman after woman? I was never sure why he kept divorcing them. I was always surprised that they weren't divorcing him, quite frankly. So that's just something I can't even respond to. There was another question back here, and then I know you had a question over there, sir. There was no other question at that
My question
table?
was basically answered by.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, it brings to mind a phrase that they used to use in this. These days I really can't define what's religion, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, I see just a second. I think that it's really clear what their mission is. They're not ashamed by their mission. I mean, they see themselves as doing God's work. I mean, they see their religious values intertwining with our political system as the right thing to do. And actually, the majority of Americans don't disagree with that. They don't see the conflict of religion influencing politics, and they'll cite the 10 Commandments, and we were developed as a Christian country, which is again another day's workshop. But they're not embarrassed at all. They don't flinch from it. They don't shy away from it. They're doing the Lord's work, and they're very proud of it.
As successful as the modern the pollution credit program works, I don't know if you're familiar with that. You can have different car companies or any kind of factory that can't afford it. They can buy credits from some other place that they can reduce. So the fact, business-wise, is to reduce the overall pollution. So it's been a very successful program. I was just thinking, married people, maybe that don't have sex, could sell the right to have sex.
Okay, so if I did just like a quick survey of have married couples here? Is there anybody who wants to admit that they're married and don't have sex? Okay, here I thought that was going to be a challenge. So if you want to meet them and like exchange your credits or something, yes, go for it. eBay under sex credits.
There you go.
That would work. That would really, really work. I'm sure that George and Laura would thank you very much for that. Yes.
They could sell a lot.
This goes back quite a ways on when we were talking about when politically we started. Didn't we really start with Nancy Reagan's Just Say No?
Yeah,
Wasn't that the beginning of the abstinence in the political?
that was more of drugs than it was anything else, which again was an asinine approach to it. And I mean that, you know, in the like the realest sense of the term. It was just so ridiculous. And I mean, here you have inner city youth who have limited opportunity, who are seeing drug dealers make more money than they could ever imagine. And, you know, then this rich, upper class white woman comes in and says, oh, you know, just say no. And I just slap her, quite frankly. I can't believe I'm getting taped for this. Don't mail this to my work. And so, you know, and I think it's that same type of really condescending attitude of we have the moral high ground. And I don't know how many of you here have read George Lakoff's book, Don't Think of an Elephant? Anyone? Okay, so a handful of folks. It's an excellent book on messaging and framing, and I'm going to just whittle it down to the real basics, and it goes like this. Republicans are considered, well, I'm sorry, social conservatives, because you know there's some good Republicans out there. Let's just be clear about that. There's like 5, but there are some really good Republicans out there. You know, my parents being 2 of them. So anyway, so you have these social conservatives that are considered like the strict model parenting. They assume that you're born bad and need to be parented in order to be good people. So that way, when you're punishing and you're putting limits and you're restricting, you're shaping their moral character. And then there is the nurturing parent, which are the liberals. And so, but liberals believe that people are born fundamentally good. And it's the obstacles in the world that then creates barriers and reactions, that they're reacting to oppression and to barriers within this world. So what we need to do then is to erase those barriers, to end racism and poverty, to increase education, and then this fully potentialed person will grow. And the strict parent just despises the nurturing parent, because the strict parent is saying, you are setting up that child for a life of disaster. If you are not giving them restrictions, if you are not reeling them in, they're going to be monsters. They're not going to be able to know how to live in society. They're not going to be able to know the difference between right and wrong. You have to just drill this into them. And at the end of the day, the strict parents do believe that the morally superior are those who are successful, because you're regimented, because you're disciplined. People who get rich don't get rich by accident. They get it because they have moral fiber, because they were willing to work hard, to play by the system, to you know, stay on the straight and narrow. And so therefore, when you're looking at poor people, they're poor because they're lazy and because they didn't follow God's structure. And why are we going to continue to enable this group of people who are making such poor choices? We can't enable them. We need to punish them. We need to engage in a very strict model. And that's what you're seeing, bringing it back to choice. Hold on a second, but bringing it back to choice, that's what you're seeing when they're talking about women who are coming in for abortions. Well, it's your fault. If you weren't morally adherent, you wouldn't be in this position. You don't need birth control because you need to be morally adherent, and that is what's going to make you successful in life. So stop screwing around, quite frankly, and get back onto the straight and narrow.
There was an article in the editorial of New York Times 2 days ago on the how luck versus the hard work.
Yeah, luck and
ethic,
pluck.
and in which it showed that conservatives generally believe that you're successful because of hard work, and liberals were likely to believe that success depends as much on that you were born into a rich family, or you have a high IQ, or you receive better education. But they pointed out that the people who are in the middle generally side with the luck explanation for success in life as well. And
Oh, really?
He
Oh,
was
that's
pointing
interesting.
out that Democrats should take advantage of this and come up with a more fair social policy.
Well, my undergraduate degree is in American Studies and American Culture. Oh, I see you. Hold on just a second. And so if you go back to like Horatio Alger writing about the Industrial Revolution, if you go back to, I think a lot of our American culture is based on the whole luck and pluck. It's a combination of both. It's not all, you don't just sit around and wait for something to happen, but if you work a little bit, get a little bit of luck, then you'll be successful. And that's been a long time belief, I think, in our culture, and now it seems to be going to either, well, not either divide, they're taking it all to the pluck side. Yes, what was your question?
I think this just say no is going to come around and hit them in the head like a boomerang, because girls get raised to say no, but then as soon as they get married, they're supposed to turn into a passionate wife.
Exactly.
And I think there's a lot of perception problems in this country. If you go in a bookstore and see, look at the books, what's all out there, so somebody must be buying it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they make tons of money on how to have sex.
How do you have sex?
That would have been a whole other lecture. I have lots of charts and diagrams and big things to show you, and I don't know that we have time. The interesting, the really frightening thing, now, I mean, we can laugh at abstinence only because it's because of how flawed it is. There's a chuckle about their whole belief system about, us just abstaining until we're married. But there's also a really scary side of it as well. And that really scary side is, oh, I see you, hold on just a second. That really scary side is, it does not prevent, teens who are in abstinent-only programs do not remain abstinent. That of Arizona students who have been through abstinence-only programs, only 20% of them believe that they will stay abstinent until marriage. That abstinence-only teens don't use birth control at the same rates. Actually, abstinent-only teens, once they break their pledge, and sexually active teens who had never gotten into the whole abstinence-only thing have equal levels of STDs. So which means that this group here is having sex, and so they're contracting some. But this group here is having sex like here, and then all of a sudden they're like right up to the top. Because nobody's told them how to use a condom. Nobody's told them what it looks like if you have HPV. Nobody has told them, where do you go? What questions do you ask? How do you find a doctor who's going to treat something that's not feeling right, and I can't talk to my parents about it because I'm not supposed to be having sex? So we're seeing that it's having a really negative impact. And so while I think psychologically, it's just reinforcing a lot of these stereotypes that we've all worked so hard to, I see you just a second, that we've all worked so hard to discredit, but now they're also putting them in harm's way, quite frankly. It's a health risk. Woman over here had a question. Yes?
Yes, I was thinking about what you were saying about the abortion folks. How about we put a bill in front of the legislature and everybody that vehemently does not want birth control or this sort of thing, put their name on the list, and for every child that's born, it doesn't make any difference whether the child is healthy, whatever, the name goes on the list, and the first baby born goes to that person, and they raise it just their own.
Well, the interesting thing about the abortion rate is, I don't know how many of you watched Meet the Press this morning, but Howard Dean was on, and we were talking a little bit about that. And he was citing a statistic that I had not heard of, which is actually that the abortion rate has gone up during the Bush administration. So clearly, the Just Say No, Marry God program is not being effective. I see you too, but there was somebody back here with a question as well. Yes?
Yeah, I was sitting here thinking about what you've been saying, and something popped into my head. We're talking mostly about women and these issues. But there's been a drive for the last several years now to make men appear stupid. In all commercials, men are stupid buffoons. What is that about? Why are the boys getting the impression that they're stupid?
Men are supposed to be like the rest of us.
Maybe we're just lowering the bar so that way he feels a little better. I don't know. I mean, that would be just an intriguing study into pop culture and why that's happening. I don't know. It's my partner, her dad, who is now deceased, was a police officer for 30 years in Anaheim, California, and she is infuriated whenever she sees, the stereotypical cop going to get a donut and being stupid, and so just from that experience alone, if you're seeing images of your own gender being portrayed as stupid, inadequate, a buffoon, I don't know if that's just a new thing or if it's...
Well, another question would be, do you see that too, or is it my imagination? Am I crazy?
I haven't, but I tend not to pay that much attention to boys. It's the whole lesbian thing. So, I mean, there could be like tremendous images on TV, and I'm not catching them at all.
But all of those images involve women too. It's a woman going, "You're a dummy. What's wrong with
Right.
you?"
Well, I think it might also get back to that whole nag thing that they're now teaching in schools. If you nag too much, your husband's not going to listen to you anymore. We have a whole lot of hands up. I'm actually going to end my formal remarks because I'm finding that your questions are much more helpful, and quite frankly, my remarks were never that formal to begin with. So,
You've given us a list of the legislative districts and how they voted in each one. This is something we could really do if we find out how our legislators voted and contacted them because they voted the wrong way. But I would like you to tell us more about some of the other legislation that has not been voted on these two columns, as well as what is this protection of the unborn.
okay. She is referencing the 2005 Arizona legislative scorecard. And you had two specific questions, which was tell a little bit more about those bills that we supported that you're not seeing any votes on. And that is because in Arizona's District 10, which is like Glendale-ish area, West Phoenix, you have a legislator by the name of Representative Doug Quelland.
What's his name?
Doug Quelland, District 10, representative, so he'll be on the left page. And so Mr. Quelland was appointed this session as the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, which is the committee that hears most of Planned Parenthood supported bills. And as is his discretion as the chair of the committee, he decides what gets heard and when. And so he decided not to ever hear either of the Planned Parenthood supported bills. So they died, and they never got anywhere. They just absolutely died. They were referred to his committee. He threw them away. We never had a chance for for all of this argument that they're having right now about the up and down vote, in DC, they wouldn't even give either of these bills an up and down vote. There are two bills, and we've been talking about them for forever. One is medically accurate sex ed. If you teach sex ed, it doesn't have to be abstinence-based. It can be abstinence-only, but you have to tell kids the facts. Stop lying about how condoms fail all the time. Stop lying about this so-called psychological impact. Stop lying about stereotypes. Make sure that kids are getting the correct information. Stop telling them that all STDs are incurable. And so that's our one bill. Not telling you what to teach, we're just saying teach the right facts. They refuse to hear it. And then the other bill is emergency contraceptives for rape survivors. It's actually what we call EC in the ER. So if you show up in the emergency room or to any health professional, a woman who says, I've been raped, I need help, and the doctor, physician's assistant, nurse, whoever, has the obligation at some point during the course of treatment to say, do you know about emergency contraception? Do you know you may become pregnant as a result of your rape? Do you know if you take emergency contraception within 5 days after unprotected intercourse, you have a higher risk of preventing an unintended pregnancy? And then if the woman says, oh, no, I did not know that, and I'd be really interested in having some, then the doctor, nurse, physician's assistant, whatever, would have to say, oh, here it is, and here's the instructions on how to take it. Or, I don't believe in emergency contraception because it's against my moral or religious beliefs, so here's a prescription and a list of pharmacies, and then you can go get it, and I can leave my work with a clean conscience knowing that I did not give you this emergency contraception. And then the woman has those options. No, they won't hear it. They won't even listen to it. They think that it is violating their religious and moral beliefs, that there's no need for it, even though that we've done surveys and found that only 40% of hospital emergency rooms actually provide it to women who present as rape victims. And so they just absolutely refuse to hear it. It did pass in about 3 years ago. It did pass the Senate, but we're a different Senate now, and it's not going to get anywhere. So, and then the protection of the unborn. I'm sorry, I don't know how much longer I have to talk. There's just so many questions. 10 minutes, okay. Protection of the unborn. Some of you know it as fetal homicide, Lacey, Peterson, the whole, what was the kid? What did they end up naming? Connor, thank you. Connor's Law, there you go. So, Arizona in the past has introduced what we would consider fetal homicide legislation, and really focused on the fetus, not necessarily focused on the woman. This is the real abbreviated version. I'm glad to answer questions afterwards. So, introduced legislation this year, heard from a lot of our supporters, heard from legislators, lobbyists, board members, hey, let's do something instead of just trying to kill the legislation, let's just try to make it better. It is, as a pro-choice community, of course, we're going to be supporting families on when they want to have a family and if they don't want to have a family, and if somebody kills you while you're trying to have a family, okay, that's a problem too. And so we tried to amend the legislation to focus on the pregnant woman as opposed to the fetus, focus on the violence against the pregnant woman as opposed to the violence against the fetus, which, if you don't realize this, domestic violence rates increase when a woman becomes pregnant and her attacker becomes more, the attacks become more forceful, more violent once she becomes pregnant. So pregnancy is actually a risk for women in a number of ways. So we were like, hey, you know what? We need to be looking out for pregnant women, so let's try to make this bill that's about pregnant women. And so we introduced an amendment. We thought it was very reasonable. We actually had conversations with the other side, which is the first time in my life. And they said, hey, doesn't sound like a bad amendment. Introduce it. Bam, failed. Dead. Absolutely failed. So that was just a little frustrating. So we were quiet about it because we were getting some good vibes from the social conservatives. Hey, you know what? This is some common ground here. Wow, we could actually do something to promote women's health care in this state. And no, they changed their mind. So the governor's office, when I was having the conversation about the abstinence-only money, because I was so irritated with that, I said, okay, and I'm still a little irritated about the protection of the unborn, the fact that you signed the bill. And the governor's office said, one, we've been a protector of women fighting against domestic violence for years. You may remember the governor, when she was Attorney General, it was one of her top priorities. It's still one of her top priorities as governor. And they said they anticipate that this bill is going to be held up in court for so long that it'll actually probably never even go into effect. So, that's protection of the unborn. Any other questions? Okay, there were some folks over here who have been waiting, because I've been focusing on this side of the room. I see you, but was there somebody else kind of like in queue? No? Okay, go for it.
Lately I've heard the definition of life, the end of life, being brain dead or brain alive. And someone suggested that that could be a very good definition of the beginning of life, when the brain first gets active. Why doesn't Planned Parenthood take that on as opposed to the sperm, egg, and uterus definition?
Well, one, because we follow the scientific version of when a pregnancy begins. We're all about the pregnancy. We could have a conversation forever as to whether a pregnancy is actually life. In some religions, it does not constitute life until it exits the womb. In some religions, it's at fertilization. So we just stick to when a pregnancy begins. And then we follow the guidelines that are provided by the laws, which talk about viability, which is 24 weeks here in Arizona. It's interpreted as 24 weeks. Because actually the guidelines from Roe v. Wade don't say 24 weeks, they say viability. Viability is construed as around 24 weeks. And so those are the guidelines that we uphold. We do not consider ourselves scientific experts. We do not do any type of research. And there are some debates about what fetal development actually constitutes. So is it really a brainwave? Is it really a heartbeat? Like, is it beating but it's not circulating anything? Is the brain triggering something but is it connecting to something? Is that spinal cord really developed? That is a gray area. And we're not scientists. So we stick with what the law tells us. And so that is, what science tells us and then what the law tells us. Anybody? Yes, I saw you, but you were waiting.
I was just wondering, there's so many commercials on television about Viagra and Cialis and all these other things. Why is it that the religious right is not objecting to that? Isn't that teaching children that sex is the most important thing in the world?
Well, it's funny because I'm fascinated by those commercials, and there's like the new KY jelly one now, the warming one, and so I watched that commercial a gazillion times, making sure that she had a wedding band on, and in every one of those commercials they're married, absolutely every single one of them, and so. I mean, the flip side to Viagra is, you know what, good for you. If intimacy with your partner is really important to you, I mean, sex is a part of our humanity. And if we have something that will, that boosts that love life, later into years, I'm thrilled for that, right on. It shouldn't be construed as a bad thing. The sad thing is that insurance companies were willing to cover that before they were actually willing to cover any type of contraceptives. That it has been through less research than the emergency contraception, that it's actually been through less technical research than the abortion pill. And so there are some hypocrisies around it moving through the system so quickly and it being insured. But we don't have any problems. I mean, go for it. 60, 70, 40, what the hell? Have a great time,
I feel like they're telling people they're telling children not to have sex, but then all they do is advertise how important it is to have non-stop sex,
Yeah, but they're all married. They're all heterosexuals and they're all married. You're never going to see two gay men being like, woohoo, Viagra. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So, yeah. What they found actually that's disappointing about Viagra is becoming one of the new club drugs. Because ecstasy, which is the really popular club drug, decreases one's ability to perform. So now they're popping Viagra along with it, and so that way they can still have sex and still be really high. Yes?
In relation to the idea that life begins at conception or the soul begins at fertilization, I did a web search, and a lot of embryologists and fertility people say that it could be as high as 50%. Of fertilized eggs never become a live birth.
That's
so
correct.
If God designed this system, obviously He doesn't care very much about 50% of the souls that are supposedly created at fertilization.
I don't know if everybody heard his comment, but that most fertilized eggs actually never even implant, or what is it, like 42% of fertilized eggs actually never even implant, and then you have a significant number of miscarriages early in the pregnancy. So most fertilized eggs, about half, don't make it. And we mentioned that at a committee hearing once, like, look, if you look at the science, blah, 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 always about the science. And one of the legislators said, yes, but that's God's choice. When a woman makes this choice, when an abortionist, forces this choice on a woman, then you're interfering with God's will. And, God's the one that can determine that. Was there another? Hold on, you asked a question, but there's this, yes.
It seems that our slogan should change from just say no to just show them how.
Just show them how. They actually, and that kind of gets onto the comment that was made back here, that all of a sudden you're no, 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 and then you're supposed to be like,
The Whore of Babylon.
yeah. Then you're supposed to know all of everything in the bedroom. And that's not to say that, having sex before you get married is like a training ground. I mean, I'm not trying to imply that. But even then, you don't have the skills. You don't know what it means to prevent pregnancy. You're not going to understand what it's if you contract a sexually transmitted disease. There's going to be a lot of questions. And if you haven't been raised with a sexually healthy self-esteem, you're not going to be able to get the answers and be, quite frankly, a full human being. Any other questions?
Can you tell us about any new techniques that you know about to fight all this that you're talking about? And we've heard a lot about what the right is doing.
Yes.
What are we doing?
Yes. Well, one, you're all registered to vote. Yes? You're all, okay, good. And two, you all know what legislative district you're in. Okay, good. And three, you've all walked neighborhoods or handed out campaign literature for candidates in the middle of August.
Yes. Yes, all of us.
Because, at the end of the day, that's the only thing that we can do is, because there is not a common ground, because there is not an effort to find common ground or reach a common dialogue, it's really about electing better people. And that's just so sad to say, sorry, you got to wait till the next election cycle. But, we really do need to wait till the next election cycle. Hold on just a second. And so at Planned Parenthood, we have our action fund, which is these little blue envelopes. It's my only pitch for cash this entire time. But this is our program that gives money, to pro-choice candidates. This is our program that distributes our voter guide. This is the program that does our phone banks. We walk districts. We support candidates. And we had last campaign season over 100 volunteers out walking in the middle of July and August. It was amazing. And this is the only way that we actually create change. You could talk to some people who would say, if you live in a Republican district, register independent, because then you could influence the primary elections. Because most of the crazies get elected in the primaries. They're not reflective of society overall. They're reflected by that 20% of the voting population that actually pays attention to primary elections, and those tend to be the real extremists on both sides of the parties. So if you're a registered Democrat in a Republican district and you want to sway the Republican primary, then you can register as an independent. The other thing that you can do is, I handed these out, they're slightly outdated, but I wasn't going to print up new ones. It's for our email network. If you want to stay informed and find out what's going on, this is the email network. And the other thing is just to continue to raise visibility by doing events like this. I mean, just you guys being here, quite frankly, purchasing property, talking to people, and letting them know that there are alternatives to this very narrow view of how our society functions, I think is a very powerful thing to do. One of the things that Susan said is that you're an apolitical group, and I would actually disagree with that. I think you're a very political group by coming together and having these conversations and learning more and taking action, and that is politics at its most basic form. So good for you. I applaud you for wanting to learn more and do more. But yeah, get out there and elect better people. Call into those talk shows. Write those letters to the editor. I mean, stay engaged and informed. They don't print any of mine anymore, so somebody else needs to start writing them. And those are really some basic things that you can do. I know that there were two other questions, but I'm seeing you're jumping out of your seat. And
Jumping.
all right, I'm going to go for.
Take one more.
Okay, I'll take one more. Yes.
In
your closing statement, just curious. The terrible climate which your organization is now functioning, how has it affected you? How, like locally and nationwide, how are you doing on membership? What's your budget like? Are you effective, becoming more effective, holding your own? Where are you?
Well, on a personal level, I just drink a lot more. I find that is tremendously helpful. My favorite wine is like a Sauvignon Blanc for anybody who'd like to make a personal donation to my cause for sanity. Organizationally, we're seeing more abortion patients now than we have in years. Now that we offer an alternative to a surgical abortion, now that there is an abortion pill that's available, and it's much less invasive, much more private, we're finding that now 50% of our abortion patients are taking the pill. And so we're really seeing a boost in those numbers, which is sad. We'd actually really like to see a boost in our contraceptive numbers for family planning. But that's tough. That part of our business has been going down for two reasons. One, because the government's been getting smaller and smaller. The federal government's been giving their same amount of dollars, but now they have less buying power, so we have a harder time serving more low-income women. The state doesn't give any money at all to low-income women for health care. And we also passed the contraceptive equity bill, which meant that insurance companies had to cover family planning. So before, we used to kind of, be the master of the pill market. But now that people can go to their regular doctors, we're like, fighting ourselves out of business, quite frankly. We do $2 million a year in uncompensated care. So we're spending a lot of money to make sure that low-income women still get health care. Fundraising, I gotta tell you, the secret to fundraising is always have a Republican in the president's seat. We do so much better. When Bill Clinton got in office, it was like, we were just so hard to raise money. And then people see W, and so they write some checks. But the problem is that people also see W hurting choice and hurting the environment and hurting education and hurting gays. And so, those checks, I'm convinced it's all the same bucket of money. We just keep swirling it around ourselves because, we're all given to the same causes. Our public affairs budget has decreased by about $50,000, which makes it very difficult to do significant lobbying efforts. And so that's my personal challenge. But our action fund, actually, our budget is increasing so that way we can do more about electing better candidates, because we really do think that that's where the change is going to be. One of the things we have to recognize is this population shift that we're having now in Arizona. What is it, like 600 people a day move to Arizona? They can't all be crazy. There has to be some moderate, reasonable people out there. So we'd like to put $50,000 to $75,000 next year into doing an ID poll and finding those reasonable people, because they might not know that their legislators are crazy. And so we feel as though we have an obligation to let them know and then tell them who else to vote for. And so that's pretty much the gist of where we are. But financially, our organization is still going strong. We've opened up 2 new health centers, and we'll probably open up 4 more over the next 5 years. Thank you all very much. I apologize if I went too long.
Okay. Vito, would you like to come up here and make a presentation to our guest speaker? Generally, I have Vito introduce the guest speaker, and that was an oversight on my part today. So instead, I'm going to let Vito offer you something.
Oh, thank you, Amy. It's a wonderful speech. And on behalf of our organization, one of our cups, so you can have Humanistic coffee whenever you want.
I just love it. Thank you.
Well, thank you again.
I will drink the straw.
Thank you so much. Excellent talk.
I can use this for my wine now.
Next week we'll have wine here. No.
If you appreciate the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix and would like to see more, then subscribe to our channel and check us out on Patreon. Links are in the description.